Hello, and welcome to Sounding Board, a community access television production of Soroptimist International of Novato. My name is Madeline Peters, and I'm here with Curtis Akins as our guest today. And Curtis comes from helping to develop the Food Network and a variety of careers. He's an author, he's a motivational speaker, he's a very, very creative person. But I'm going to let Curtis introduce himself. I'm just delighted to have you here, Curtis. This is really...
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Madeline.
You have to share with our viewing audience a little bit about who you are and how you got to this point in time.
Well, they're sitting there like, who is this guy? But if you live in Novato, California, or Marin County, I hope you know me or have heard about me. But I'm a dad. I'm a son. I'm a citizen of the world, and I'm probably the most blessed person you're going to meet, Madeline. And I'm proud to say that. I love life. The big thing, I got into television years ago. I'm 52 now, and I got into television, I think, in my late 20s. The reason I got into television was to promote reading. For those who don't know, I didn't learn to read till I was 26 years old. I went through high school, graduated high school, went to college. I was at Southern University in Baton Rouge, transferred to the University of Georgia, and I still couldn't read.
How did you get by? How did you manage to negotiate all those years of schooling without learning how to read?
That's that $1 million question, right? And it's really, it's one of those things when you think about it and you go, wow, how did I do it? But the truth is, at an early age, I knew I had two things going for me. One, I could remember things, and two, people liked me. We got to back that a bit because it's still happening today. Kids are going through high school, they're getting into college, they're not reading. We still have a huge problem with illiteracy in America, in the UK, in Australia. It's a worldwide problem that I think, I feel very strongly that we turn our shoulder to it. We turn our backs, not all the way to our backs, but our shoulders to it. And we don't want to face the problem that our children are growing up not reading, as an adult.
Well, that's one of the things that impressed me in our earlier conversations, as we've been having conversations now for several months,
right.
Is that, you really have a lot of successes in your professional life. And I think one of the things that really impressed me is that no matter what you did or what you are doing, you really have the focus on helping that kid,
right.
Helping people really learn how to read and learn. It's much more than that, but I'll let you tell.
Well, I mean, I like the fact that you asked me these questions, Madeline. I mean, we're friends.
Yeah.
And I hope the home audience understands that. And I've always felt like people, they make that statement sometimes, it's just business. And I'm like, well, I really don't want to do business with people that I'm not friends with. You know, I don't try to make a business deal to get over on someone. I feel, I'm not saying that, Wall Street and the banks, they have a different feeling from that, but I do believe in my core, Madeline, that if you do good business, it's good for everyone involved. And to be a good citizen of the world, and I'm not just saying this to sound good, I mean, this is my core. I come from a family of 6 kids, mom and dad, that worked their tails off, and it was around the table. We'd eat, we'd talk, if there was leftover, we'd go feed the neighbor who didn't have, and if there was leftovers at the neighbor's house, they'd bring some down. That's just the way it was, and the way I hope it should or could be.
So you grew up in a culture of where people kind of, your family members and your community members
took care of
each other. And so it seems to me like the thing that emerges from our talks and what I understand you're trying to do is that you're constantly looking to do that same thing in your adult life.
I do, and I want to do it. My mom is we weren't Catholic, but she's a saint. My pop. I tell the early days in television, I would say, if I could choose my parents, I definitely would choose my mom. My dad I might throw back a couple of times, but he passed away a few years ago, and I started to think about the life lessons that I learned from my father, and the things that with my oldest son that I'm reliving, the sins that I committed against my dad. My son is throwing it back at me, and I don't mean that to put my son down. He's a wonderful child. But he's a young man, and I hope he will grow into his own. I recently said to him that, son, this is your life. I remember at 19, I did some things that my dad thought was crazy. I gave up my football scholarship at the University of Georgia, at Southern University, and I moved to California. And my dad thought, oh boy, you must be crazy, in that Southern accent of his. And my son, I said to him, I said, sweetie, I love you. Sometimes I don't like what you're doing, but I still love you. And I'm trying to back up. It's hard for dad to back away when we've lived what you're living. And now I see what my dad was saying. I see it.
So it seems as though you had some experiences in your own years growing up in your family. And then you're having some experiences now being a dad,
right.
being
a
citizen
dad,
of the world.
Being a citizen,
yeah. And you're also, to me, I hear, the theme of just staying connected and communication.
Yeah.
And then one of the biggest gifts that I see in you is that your way of constantly reaching out to share your knowledge, your support, your motivation, not just with your immediate family, but with a much larger circle, whether it's a circle of students or whether it's a circle of viewers. So that's the theme that I see. And I'd like you to talk about
that
how that has tracked you all of these years, from the time you were a kid to you're in college, to being a dad, to your world work, because there's not that many people that I see that really are giving back, living and trying to teach others.
I feel, and I mean this, I say I'm blessed, because some of the things that have happened in my life, how's the saying? There, except for the grace of God, there go I. I could be in that situation. And some of that, I get chills when I think of that. Some of the things that have happened, I've experienced and lived through, and I'm still a witness to the great things that have happened in my life. Madeline, I'm getting a little emotional. I'm trying to calm down and just get back to this idea that I don't want to ask my children or my nieces or my nephews, whether they're my biological children or my daughter who came in my life when she was 8. When I married her mom, she became my daughter, and she still is to this day. She's I love her as much as I love my biological children. Or my nephew, like a young man named Abraham, a Jewish kid who called me, and Uncle Curtis, I want you to be in my bar mitzvah. So I'm down in Los Angeles recently, and I'm the uncle that had the honor to pick up the Torah so it could be wrapped to put back in the ark. And little Abraham with this, other family members said when they called my name for me to stand up to come down, Abraham just lit up like a light. And I love this child like he was my brother, my biological brother or sister's child, and his mom is like my sister. So Abraham, it's Uncle Curtis, is coming to my bar mitzvah. So I don't ask people to do things that I wouldn't do myself.
Well, what I'm seeing,
and I want people to love. I want people to give. The royalties for my cookbooks, I give back to reading programs. Part of every dollar I've made, I've given back. Not because we're supposed to tie it at church, but I want to lead and live an example. I want to set an example.
Who are your heroes?
Oh, that's all those questions. And I've always said I don't have heroes, except for maybe JC, Jesus Christ. My mom is someone I admire. My father, after he's passed away, and think about the lessons he's loved. But the 3 men that I'm basing my master's work around are Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King, and former President Jimmy Carter. Those 3 men, the way that I feel they live their lives, and remember, they are men, and things happen to humans. And when I say men, I mean mankind. But those men, they took grains, ideas, and just made them worldwide phenomena. It's just, Jimmy Carter, I thought, was a wonderful president. I was a young man when he was president. I thought he had such a heart as a president. But like thinking of the Camp David Accord, all the things that he tried to do. I mean, Jimmy Carter he's a Georgian. I'm from Georgia. I remember first hearing about Jimmy Carter when I was young, and heard about this guy who went into a nuclear reactor and saved all these people. And then I found out it was Jimmy. I'm like, wow. And then later on, he became governor of the state of Georgia, and I had a chance to hear him speak at my brother's. My brother graduated from technical school, Atlanta Technical School.
Yes.
And Jimmy Carter gave the commencement address. And I'll never forget hearing him talk. And I'm thinking, wow, I want to be like him. I want to be like him.
So be like him, because you talked about your different influences. Okay, let's look at you and the kind of things that you have done and the kind of things that you're trying to do.
Nothing compared to Dr. King, nothing compared to Jimmy Carter, nothing compared to, of course, Mahatma Gandhi, nothing compared to, an Oprah Winfrey, nothing compared to a Denzel Washington, nothing compared to a Richard Pryor or Flip Wilson. I'm just a dude who's trying to go, okay, guys, if I can decide I want to be on television, learn to read at age 26, then you can do it. Do not, I want what and I don't like to say what I want. What I'm hoping to share with the children I work with at schools, when I speak to them or when I give motivational talks, the fact that I want people to feel, and what I'm hoping to share is that this is a guy who went from not reading at age 26 to writing cookbooks, to meeting presidents, to traveling the world through food and through speaking. If he can do it at age 26, I'm in high school, I'm in elementary school, I'm in middle school. I can take charge of my education, and then I can make my dreams reality. That's what I'm trying. I want to get that word out to kids first, or no, I shouldn't say first, because there are literally millions of grown-ups that can't read. And the only way they're going to get their information is either through television, through the radio, or through someone speaking it to them. So if people watching us here know someone or suspect someone of having a problem with reading, I hope they will talk to them and say, that Curtis Aikens guy, he learned to read at age 26. You can learn. The Marin County Free Library taught me to read. And it's in their honor that I give back these, because the free library, not Marin County Public Library, not Marin County, donation library. It was a Marin County Free Library that said, hey, we can help you. And, I wouldn't have anything if it hadn't been for people who gave to the library. So
this seems to be your way then of, because you've received this gift of literacy and recognition of your talents and the support that you needed to go on and do these other things. So this is your giving back.
Amen.
Giving back.
Amen. It is truly, it's like, and one of the things my pop used to say, and it just hits me this day, Daddy would say, well, spend it while you got it because you can't take it with you. You know what I mean? It was stuff like that. And you go like, what does he mean, spend it while you got it because you can't take it with you? I'm like, what does he mean by that? And it's like, you know what? When you die, you dead. Mm-hmm. No matter how much you made on this earth, when you die, hey, and that means something. My pop was not an educated man, but he was a smart man. And that's the thing I try to also to share to people, share with people, but just because I couldn't read. Now, I didn't know this back then. Because you can't read does not mean you're dumb. Mm-hmm. It just means there's a skill you're lacking. Mm-hmm. We've had this conversation is like, wow, man, I've never talked the way I'm talking with you on this forum, but I'm enjoying the heck out of it. Because most of the time when I go give these speeches or talks to groups, you were talking about the things I've done. I did have a chance to work with the Food Network. I was the first African American to get a network contract to deal with the culinary, which, I'm proud of that. I was the first one to work with, I had a network contract with ABC back at the Home Show in the 90s. I left the Home Show and went to Good Morning America at the same time that we were starting the Food Network. And that was so much fun. The people I've met, I think about it. It's like, and guys, I hope I don't sound like I'm bragging, but I want people who feel like they have less to know, if Curtis did this, I definitely can do this.
It's interesting to me because, I've read the introduction and I'm familiar with your cookbooks, and I read the introduction in one of your cookbooks, which is the history of your learning how to read. Right. And it's like, I don't know many professional chefs that bare their souls the way, about their personal lives and their contribution the way you do. And I think it was this one, the
Right.
book on harvest, where you tell your introduction is your journey to literacy.
Exactly. And I think that's important. I feel like, you know, wow, so much has happened in the last 52 years. You know, this journey to literacy, I didn't know I couldn't read until I started school in that segregated South.
Yes.
You know, I started school at the all-black school, J.P. Carr. Now, I'm not saying that's why I didn't learn to read, because my older brothers and sisters went through that school system a lot longer than I did, a lot farther in that system than I did, and they're literate. But remember, everyone learns different. Every child learns different. So it's real, you know, so whatever that school was feeding them was the right food for me. And I remember thinking how, you know, and I had some very progressive parents for being, you know, old Southern folks, right? In the county that we're from, Rockdale County, we were one of the first counties in the state of Georgia to integrate. And a year or two before, well, almost 3 years before that we knew that, well, they knew that the school was going to be forced integrated, Rockdale County allowed people to what was called freedom of choice. You could choose to go to the all-black school, or you could choose to go to the all-white school, or, you know. And of course, no white kids chose to go to the black school. So, but there were a few African American kids whose parents said, we're going to go to that school. And I had a friend, Danette Levitt. She lived right across the street from us. The Levitt family is a prominent family in Conyers. They owned the funeral home. And I remember seeing Danette. She would sit on the steps after school with her books. And I remember I'd walk down the hill from J.P. Carr, and I would see Danette sitting there, and I'm thinking, wow, she's got this thing with books I wish I had. You know, why don't I have that thing with books? I would look at the books, and I just see the pictures. I mean, those words, now I don't have my glasses on, so those words now, I mean, that's what they look like it's like just hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, I'm like looking at it going,
Random lines, yeah.
random, just black stuff on white paper, right? But Danette, she was out there all day, and I remember I would just watch Danette. You know, years later, Danette had one of the most beautiful singing voices. And I remember when we got married, Danette sang at our wedding, and she sang "See You on This Ribbon to the Sky." And you know, it's funny how, as she was singing that song, I was thinking, this is back when I got married, I was thinking about Danette sitting on her stoop, reading. And anyway, so after third grade, at the end of third grade, Mrs. Harper, my first white teacher, said to my mom, I want to have a meeting with you and Mr. Akins. And it's funny because Miss Harper, a small town, so everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. and Mrs. Harper knew my mom and dad, you know, but to mom and dad, they were, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Harper. You know, that's just the way it was in that South. So we're having this meeting. Dad was working, so he couldn't come. So Mom, Miss Harper, and me. And she says, and this is what I heard. She didn't really say this, but I heard, he's dumb, he's stupid. His punishment is to repeat the third grade. What she really said, you know, looking back as a grown-up, you know, Ms. Akins, Curtis, I'm so happy to have him in class, but he's a bit behind. And I think the right thing to do is have him repeat the third grade to catch him up, you know. But a third grade child is hearing, dumb, stupid, punishment.
Of course.
I just kind of blacked out when they talked about repeating the third grade. I'm like, oh no. So, and I remember like yesterday, I was sitting in that little chair, and my mom, Mrs. Harper, was sitting I was sitting in my desk. Mrs. Harper was sitting in the grown-up chairs, and I just went blank. I know I just went, bah. I will never, no one is ever going to say I'm dumb and stupid again. So next time around in third grade, I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to avoid having to read out loud.
So this is where you picked up the tricks to
you know,
make it through.
The things that got, I mean, like, if you sound smart, people think you're smart. That was one of my things. So I would listen to Bill Cosby and Flip Wilson, Richard Pryor, African-American men, Sidney Poitier. And it's so funny. I got the chance to meet all those, except for Richard Pryor. I got to meet these people later on in life. Yeah. But I remember thinking how, okay, Bill Cosby, you know, he can do the Ebonic, but he can sound just as white as a dude from, you know, from Cambridge, right? And Flip Wilson, Richard Pryor, you know, Sidney Poitier, all these African-American men, the DJs on the radio, I would learn to enunciate like these guys. So you sound smart, people think you're smart, you know? So, and that was one of my get-overs. So I learned, I cultivated all these ways, third grade, fourth grade, all through school, I came up with ways of getting by, without having to read out loud. And people, it's funny. I go back and I sometimes I do like these Q&As with groups, especially when I was at the Food Network, and it was a higher profile life. Then we do these Q&As, and people will say, "Well, what was it like in high school for you?" I said, "Well, high school was interesting. Some days it was great, other days it was really hard. Never had a date in high school because I was afraid to have to read a menu. Can you imagine taking a girl out and you can't read the menu? Was a captain of the football team. I was president of the Minority Student Association. I was a member of the student council.
So all high-profile positions, but you
school.
just kept your...
Yeah. Well, people talk about team building and all that, delegating.
Yeah.
I was a master at delegating because, I couldn't take the notes. So, Betty, you take the notes. Mark, you do this. I was always, and I would facilitate the
Well, I
meeting.
can imagine, too, your personality comes
Yeah.
across that you're building that sort of
That-
collegiality.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
And
like,
so that's what, yeah. So again, all of this contributed to your interest in kind of serving others and building literacy.
Yeah.
But, your career has been in food. And one of the things that's interesting is we've had lots of conversations.
right.
This one is where, like I sort of know the food side,
Right.
and I've known a little bit about the personal side. I think I understand your approach to food now, listening to more of your personal story too.
well,
but I want you to
explain
address
why-
this,
I-
as well.
Here's the deal. I'm going to tell people. I'm sharing this. I'm a Southern boy, and men in the South can cook like women. We get our hands in the kitchen and go. And it's funny because my mother, she described her kitchen as a one-butt kitchen. You know what I'm talking about? The barber's lab. Your camera versus barber's lab, but one butt in the kitchen at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Now my butt was the second butt that could be in the kitchen. Now wasn't room for me to work, but I watch her. Right now, this is interesting because I've always had this natural gift to pair foods. I could just know things would work. So years later, when I wanted to make a difference, I got to go back before I say that. I moved to California, and I'm working at Alpha Beta. Alpha Betas are closed now, but
Yes,
worked
I know
at
them.
You know them, right? Tell a friend. But the Alpha Beta on 3rd Street down in San Rafael, which is now the Whole Foods, I worked at that Alpha Beta, and I worked in the grocery department, and I loved it. And people say, well, how did you work in the grocery store? But I had a job in the grocery store when I was in college, when I was in high school. And it's funny because when you look at a grocery store and you break it down, it's color-coded. Okay, whole milk has a red label. Skippy peanut butter with nuts has a red label. 2% milk has blue, and it's color-coded. So if you're savvy and you can know your way around a grocery store without having to read a thing, just know the color code, the color scheme. So I worked in the grocery store. And I could deal. I knew numbers in my head. I knew food. And I got into a fight with my boss. And I remember thinking, maybe he can't read, because people who can't read, we don't fight with anybody. We get along. I don't make waves. I get along. I'm a team builder. So I'm thinking, well, maybe he has a problem. So I remember going home. I was living in Petaluma at the time. My little house, I was sharing with a guy named Jerry Warnerman. I go home. I grab a pad and paper like I could write something, and I'm going to come up with an idea that I can do without having to work for somebody, And I couldn't spell what I wanted to do, but I had the pad and paper, and the first thing that came to my mind was all these restaurants that would come into the store and buy produce for their, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What if, there's got to be a farmer's market here in California like there was in Georgia. So why don't I go to these restaurants and see if I can go down, instead of them coming to the grocery store, I can go buy their produce and deliver it to them. Long story short, it worked. That was my start. Now, this was back in the 80s. 81, 82, I started that business. And at the time, Joe Carcione, the greengrocer, was working out of the South San Francisco produce market. And I met Joe. Joe was like one of those guys that, this is where it comes from. Not only from my parents and my childhood, but everyone along my path gave. So it's in Joe's honor that I write books and I give my knowledge, because Joe would sit down, he would have his coffee in the morning before taping his little segments at the produce cafe. And I would sit in there with just me and Joe, have coffee, and he'd tell me about produce. He would share his knowledge.
So you you had your mentors in lots of different areas.
In lots of different areas, right?
Yeah.
So later, I mean, Joe, and then the guys, the Murphys at the Mushroom House, the Banana King Louie, the guys, I'm trying to think of it, Tarantino Produce. All these people taught me things to fill in the gaps that I didn't have from my southern upbringing or from going to the farmer's market with my dad. So all these men at the produce market would teach me things like your nose. You smell it. When fruits are ripe, they have a freshness to them. When they start to go past their peak, there's a sour. Go up to a box of tomatoes, put your nose in. If you smell something, there's a rotten tomato in there. Get how things feel when vegetables are ripe, they're nice and firm. When fruits are ripe, they have a little give to them. All these things, buy what's in season. The things that they're talking about now, we lived, right? Buy what's in season. Asparagus is in the spring. That's all things like spring onions and all those things that I learned. Bananas, how to buy a banana, how to ripen a pear, how to do an avocado. All this stuff I learned in the produce market.
So what you're telling me is that, and I'm making this connection. I'm asking you to
Kind of tie the loop.
Is that you grew up with people giving to you,
yes.
And they gave so you grew up with a sense of community and a shared knowledge. And so what you're doing now with all of your work is sharing back.
I hope.
And actually that cycle keeps continuing.
I hope.
Because what I see is you're not just trying to perpetuate this for yourself, you're trying to teach, or what I've seen you do is try to teach other people to do what you are doing, sort of like mentor others as well. Am I right on that?
I hope so, but again, my hero, Jesus Christ, right?
Yes.
Okay, was a very humble person according to what I've read. So we shouldn't brag about ourselves. We should just do the work and let other people either like it or criticize it, right? Is fair enough? But it wasn't just those guys, but I remember meeting Julia Child and Paul Prudhomme on the same day. They were the same. Mm-hmm. Emeril Lagasse shares his world with you. I'm trying to think of all the great chefs I've worked with. One of my dearest friends, Robin Leach, the guy from Lifestyles of Rich and Famous. People look at him and think one thing, but I know another. I know how open his heart is, how giving he is. I'll never forget meeting Muhammad Ali. I mean, I think about the people I've met all my life, and I go, wait a minute, I'm the guy from Conyers, Georgia, and I met Muhammad Ali. I mean, we're in a restaurant, and we're having dinner, I'm doing my thing, and Ali's in the middle of the room, and you think, oh, there's a champ. Or you think, there's the champ. It's not Ali, there's the champ. So he stands up to leave, and people start to clap, me too. And then he starts to walk, and he gets a standing ovation. And I'm sitting maybe 15 feet away from where Ali, the champ, is sitting, and he's coming towards me, and I'm clapping. I'm thinking, well, I can't move out of the way. I mean, where do I go? So I'm trying to make room for the champ, and about 6 feet away from me, he drops into a crouch. And he starts to throw jabs, and he's walking towards me, and I'm thinking, this is Muhammad Ali. And what do if I pretend to hit him? If I pretend to box, he's gonna knock me out. So I'm sitting up there, and the champ goes, and he's just doing all the shadow boxing, and he throws a punch, and it stops like that close to my nose, and then he gives me this hug. This is Muhammad Ali. Oh. I watched him in the Thrill of Manila. I watched him take on Foreman and Frazier and all these guys, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the champ. He throws a punch, and it stops him. And he puts his arm around me and goes, I'm just a brother trying to pay the bill. I thought, I wish my pop was here to hear this and see this. He goes, I'm just a brother trying to pay the bills. And I thought, there it is. He's sharing. He's going, dude, do what you got to do to take care of your kids and your family and the world.
Well, it seems as though, the tenor of our conversation today is one of enthusiasm and
I love life.
Ideas and sharing and giving and humility as well. Right. I know there's so many things we can talk about. And the kind of things that you've tried to do in terms of whether it's motivation, whether it's being a good person and giving back to the community, whether it's teaching people how to create a tasty meal on a limited budget. We have lots of plans for you.
Yeah, I want to do that.
But it's like, as we look, as we look at what we've been talking about, what is one thing that you'd like to say to leave with our viewing audience right now, as we begin to close?
We're gonna wrap it up. Wow, this is really flown by.
I know. Always does.
If there's one thing, well, I can't say just one, but reading. I say to people now, because I've done a lot of work for cancer and diabetes and all these types of groups, and it's great work. It's great work. We have to continue to do that. But if you have the time to donate to the local reading program or some extra money to give to them, please do that, because when we raise money for cancer and for diabetes, we turn those funds over and hope someone else comes up with a cure, or hope someone comes up. And it's great work. Do not misunderstand me here. But when you give to a reading program, or when you volunteer to teach someone to read, like Steve and Jenny, the people that taught, a white couple that taught me to read, they didn't change my life. They saved my life. And that's what you can do when you teach someone to read. You don't, now that I can read, the lights are on.
The world's,
yeah.
the world is your oyster.
Truly, and I've got the oyster blade that has
I
to
know.
peel it open. It's like, so I want, if I can, it's the one thing I can say is, love your kids and love my kids, and help someone learn to read. When I say when I say love your kids as a daddy, I want to love my children, even though the days
There are crazy days.
They're crazy days. I want to love my children and
Yeah.
treat them good, but I want to love your child like he or she is mine.
Right.
That's stuff like that.
That goes back to your view of the being a member of the world community.
Amen. Amen.
Curtis, we are out of time. I know this. I know.
Can I
But
come
we'll
back?
just have to. Of course, you can. I want to take this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and
I like high five.
and having such a personal conversation with us. And
Thank you for having me.
we're going to close right now. This is Sounding Board. This is a community access television production of Soroptimist International of Novato. It's a totally volunteer crew. I'd like to also thank Leon Johnson, who has been helping us set up, and thanks to Executive Director of Novato Public Access Television, Rick Tucker. Thank you very much, and again, thank you, Curtis.
My pleasure. Peace.